How one evening, one casual confession, one "we need to talk" can turn a life upside down. This story pulls you into a whirlwind of events, where behind the everyday pretense, a simple week-long fishing trip with friends, lies a secret, ready to tear apart a family, friendship, and even the protagonist's sense of self. Confronted with betrayal and open manipulation, he's forced to reconsider every moment spent with a wife who openly admits to her affair. What can you do when even your friends seem to take her side? How do you keep your sanity in a maze of lies and hidden motives? This gripping, intense narrative will leave no one indifferent. Hey, dear friend, while you're watching this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and put your royal like. I had just finished packing my things for the upcoming week-long fishing trip with my two closest friends. A wave of excitement bubbled inside me, but persistent doubts crept into my mind. My friendship with these guys started way back in elementary school. We grew up together, forming a bond stronger than brotherhood. We'd shared countless adventures, especially on trips like this, but this particular one felt different. Usually these outings included our wives, a tradition we started back when we were just dating, long before any of us had settled down into family life. This time, however, everything was about to change. At the last minute, Mark got a call for an important meeting, and his wife, Shelley, decided to stay back with him. A few days before our departure, Wes found out he had a Friday meeting scheduled, so his wife also canceled her plans. When my wife, Riley, heard that the other wives wouldn't be coming, she decided not to go either. The trip began to feel less thrilling than I'd imagined, and I found myself feeling somewhat disappointed. These trips had always been filled with shared laughter and camaraderie, but they also held special significance for Riley and me, something we both cherished before, during, and after our vacations. I found myself more concerned about losing that connection with her than about the fishing itself. Honestly, Riley and I had already spent a close and intense week together leading up to this trip. There were moments when I wanted a bit more sleep, but she seemed determined to make our time together as fulfilling as possible. It was a familiar scenario I looked forward to, especially considering how rare our physical connection had become. On average, we'd only see each other a couple of times a week, often feeling rushed or as if her mind was somewhere else. This sharply contrasted with our early years of marriage, when we seized every opportunity to be close. The gradual change in our intimacy became painfully obvious about 7 years ago. We went from being close almost daily, sometimes even twice a day, to only a few times a week. I often tried to initiate intimacy, but Riley would simply brush it off. Initially, I felt frustrated, but after a few minor arguments, I stopped pushing the issue. Eventually, when the waiting became too long, I learned to cope on my own. That Thursday evening, I took a break from packing and enjoyed a cold beer in my office while Riley was upstairs putting the kids to bed. After some time, she came down, poured herself a glass of wine in the kitchen, and joined me in the living room. Sitting beside me, she took a sip and looked at me in a way that left me feeling unsettled. "Honey," she began, her tone more serious than I expected, "we need to talk, and I really want you to listen to me." Her face showed tension and fear. "I know what I'm about to say might hurt you, but please, let me finish first. I promise to answer any questions afterward. I should have brought this up sooner, but I needed time to think about some things." A sense of dread swept over me as I noticed her anxious yet determined expression. She took a deep breath and another sip of wine before continuing. "I know you've been unhappy with how things have been lately," she said softly. "Honestly, I have been too. I love you deeply, but I don't feel the same connection with you that I once did. I don't want this to ruin our marriage. It's the last thing I want. You're an amazing father, a loyal partner, and my best friend. But it feels like something is missing, something I can't get from you." My heart wavered, and I was overcome with a mix of anger and confusion. What was she saying? Yes, I'd felt the growing distance between us, but why had she been so affectionate last week if this was how she felt? I opened my mouth to respond, but she raised her hand to stop me. "Michael, please, you promised to let me finish," she insisted firmly. Holding back my frustration, I leaned back and listened closely. "Michael, I met someone," she whispered, her voice barely audible but resolute. "It's someone I've known for some time, and I can't go back to the way things were. I want to be with him, and I can no longer continue deceiving you or hiding the truth. My feelings for you run deep, but this is something I have to pursue. With him, I feel a sense of vitality that reminds me of how I felt when we first got married. It's a feeling I crave, something I can no longer ignore." I jumped to my feet, my anger flaring. "Are you really saying that you're cheating?" Riley remained calm, reaching out gently to settle me back down. "Michael, please stop," she pleaded. "I warned you that this would be difficult to hear, but you promised to listen, so sit down and listen carefully." I clenched my fists, struggling to keep my composure as she continued. "I've already consulted Wes about the legal implications. If we divorce, I'll be entitled to a substantial portion of your income for alimony and child support. The kids and I will remain in the house, and you'll receive half of the retirement savings. You'll face serious financial strain, and the children will have to endure the pain of a broken home." She held my gaze with unsettling honesty. "For the children's sake, and for all of us, I'm asking you to accept this. I still care for you, and we don't have to lose everything. We can maintain aspects of our relationship, maybe not as frequently as before. But there will be nights when I'll be with him, and sometimes I'll travel with him." My mind spun in confusion. After a prolonged silence, I managed to voice my distress. "Riley, I thought I understood you. I thought you loved me. Now you're destroying everything we've built. How long has this been going on? Who is he?" She sighed, her demeanor hardening. "Michael, accusations won't help. I hoped we could handle this together and maintain the stability we've had for 11 years of marriage. But I'm not giving you specifics. No dates or names. That's none of your business. And if you insist on digging deeper, there will be consequences." She paused, allowing her words to sink in before continuing. "This isn't my first experience with someone else. I'm tired of hiding it. You should know because I can't keep pretending. I need these evenings with him, and you can stay home with the kids while I fulfill my needs." Stunned, I listened to her speak, her tone calm yet unyielding. "I won't tell you who he is because I fear you might act impulsively. The children rely on you, Michael. You're their source of stability. If you demand answers, there will be consequences. I've taken steps to ensure that." The ease with which she laid out her intentions shocked me, clearly showing that she had thought this through carefully. I mumbled, "I guess I should tell the kids that I won't be able to join them on the trip." As I reached for my phone, Riley grabbed my hand, her voice steady. "No, Michael, you're going on this trip. The kids will stay with your parents as planned, and I won't be alone here for 2 weeks. You need this time to come to terms with everything. If you try to alter our plans, there will be consequences. We're monitoring the situation, Michael, and if you break the arrangement, you'll regret it." Riley approached the table and took out a large envelope, handing it to me. "This is a report on your actions over the past month. Go through it, and you'll see that we're aware of everything. If you try to interfere, I'll ensure your life is thoroughly disrupted." She turned and headed toward the stairs. "I'm going to bed. Whether you join me or not is your choice. Nothing has to change unless you force it to." I sank back into the chair, the weight of her words enveloping me. Who was this woman? What had happened to the person I thought I knew? She felt like a stranger to me, cold and calculating. I opened the envelope, leafing through page after page of meticulously documented notes, records of minor moments I could barely recall. Every insignificant detail, from a small stain on my shirt to a fleeting glance at someone, was carefully noted. The extent of the surveillance was overwhelming, raising questions I wasn't sure I wanted answers to. Is Riley connected to someone powerful, wealthy, or potentially dangerous? After an hour of captivating reading, an uneasy feeling grew within me. It seemed they possessed knowledge that should be mine alone. Am I being watched? Have they bugged me? Or is this part of some cunning plan Riley has devised? She descended the stairs with a restrained, inscrutable expression that only fueled my irritation. "Well, Michael," she said with cold indifference, "are you going to bed? Or are you planning to sit here sulking all night?" Without waiting for my reply, she turned and headed to our bedroom. I stayed on the couch, my thoughts too chaotic to follow her. The next morning, Riley's voice was sharp as she woke me. "Get up, Michael. Clean yourself up before the kids see you didn't sleep in our room. When you return from your trip, I expect you to act as if everything is normal." Her gaze was unwavering. "If you insist on living separately or bring up any issues, you know what the consequences will be. I'm willing to meet you halfway at times, but you need to contribute to this marriage. And if you think about being with another woman, I'll divorce you without hesitation." Rage erupted inside me, and I finally lost control. "Are you serious, Riley? You want me to just accept this while you spend time with another man, and I'm not allowed the same freedom? I hadn't even thought of it. But why do you get to dictate what's fair for you but not for me?" She smirked slyly, barely reacting. "Let's be honest, Michael. You know what I provide is more than enough for your needs. If you're looking for something else, it's only to get back at me. If you can't hold up your end of the deal, why shouldn't I find what I want elsewhere?" My frustration made my voice tremble. "You never said you wanted something different or more. How was I supposed to know when you acted like everything was fine? I thought I was doing everything to make you happy." Unfazed, she replied, "Michael, if you have to ask, it only proves how far removed from reality you are. It's not about quantity, but quality. You've never understood what I need, and I eventually lost hope that you ever would." I stood there, drained, barely able to respond, and like a zombie went through my morning routine. At breakfast, our son Ryan noticed my mood and asked, "Dad, is something bothering you?" I opened my mouth to reply, but Riley intervened. "Your dad is just worried about a minor work issue," she said, casting me a pointed look that instantly silenced me. "Everything will be fine after the holidays," she added, returning to her meal. Later at work, I decided to ignore her suggestion and cancel my trip. I was supposed to leave right after work, meet the others at Chuck's, load the SUV, and head out. Pete was going with me, while Wes would join later in the week, as he had to leave midweek. I called Pete to inform him of the change and even offered him my truck if he needed it. But Pete interrupted me, speaking with authority. "Oh no, Michael, you can't do that. I just spoke with Riley, and she said you might try something. She mentioned you've been tense lately and confirmed with your assistant that there's nothing urgent at work. I assured her you're going on this trip, and if necessary, I'll make sure you go, even if I have to drag you there myself." I was about to protest, but a disturbing thought stopped me. What if Pete is involved in this too? Riley had plans with her new man, and Pete was supposed to be with me while Wes would join us later in the week. Could he be involved? Or is someone else entangled in this complex situation? I felt cornered and realized I needed to act cautiously. I considered setting up cameras to monitor the situation, but even that idea seemed risky. The report indicated that Riley had been tracking my purchases and calls. I needed to act strategically and carefully. Even my cash withdrawals were under close scrutiny, complicating any attempt to manage spontaneous expenses discreetly. Immersed in thought at the table, I was abruptly interrupted by the vibration of my phone. Riley's voice came through sharp. "Michael, I didn't send you on this trip so you could meddle in my personal affairs. Pete just informed me that you attempted to cancel the trip. Consider this your final warning. No questions or calls to me, or you'll find yourself without a home, and the kids will be out of reach. Understood?" Before I could respond, she ended the call, leaving me in a stunning silence. So Pete had reported my actions. Was he complicit in what was happening, or genuinely concerned for my well-being? Lately, I couldn't shake the feeling that my friends seemed to favor Riley more, as if she had somehow won their loyalty in secret. Could they truly be part of this? It seemed unlikely, but the uncertainty gnawed at me. Not wanting to provoke Riley further, I continued the trip and met the guys for dinner at a cafe. They laughed and joked as usual, while I mostly sat there, lost in my thoughts. Eventually, Wes noticed my mood and leaned in closer. "Michael, is everything all right? You seem a bit off lately." I looked up, hesitated, then exhaled deeply. There's something wrong with Riley's mindset, and I feel unprepared to deal with it. Part of me can't accept that she's serious, but if she truly means it, this could spell the end of my marriage. Pete exchanged a concerned glance with Wes. "Listen, buddy," Pete interjected. "Riley called me this morning. She wanted to make sure you were really on this trip. She mentioned you've been hard to communicate with lately and thought you needed some time to unwind. We assured her we'd keep an eye on you and help you have some fun." Wes nodded in agreement. "Yeah, you've been looking pretty stressed lately, Michael. Maybe a break is just what you need. Relax a little, take a breather, and clear your mind." He nudged me with a playful smile. "I even brought your favorite whiskey. Come on. Nothing has ever stopped us from enjoying our annual trip, right? And since there are no ladies around, we can truly relax, drink, share stories. This is our time." Their support gave me a push, and we headed out to the fishing spot. After a short drive, we arrived just in time for a drink before bed. The next morning, we rose early to fish, and I tried to occupy my mind by focusing on the gentle flow of the water and the forest's tranquility. But by the time we returned to the cabin, Riley was back in my thoughts, relentlessly occupying my mind. Doubts and worries simmered beneath the surface. That evening, as we gathered with drinks, Wes noticed my distracted expression. "Michael, you look like you've lost your best friend, but you know we're here for you. What's troubling you?" It felt like I would burst if I didn't speak, so I began to open up. These were my oldest friends, the ones I'd known since childhood, and if anyone could help me sort out what was happening, it was them. I shared the growing rift I'd been feeling over the years, the strain in my marriage, and the shocking ultimatum Riley had given me last Thursday. When I finished, Wes leaned back, visibly taken aback. "Are you sure she actually said that? I can't picture Riley thinking that way." "That's what I thought too," I replied, shaking my head in disbelief. "But that's exactly what she said, as clearly as I remember. She was absolutely serious." Pete rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Michael, if you're facing the possibility of divorce, that's a lot to handle. Splitting a family affects the kids, and courts usually favor the mother in custody matters. If you can't prove her unfit, it'll be tough to win custody. You'll likely be responsible for child support until they're adults, maybe even their college tuition. Since she's unemployed, you'll owe alimony until she remarries, and then there's the house. She'll either keep it, or you'll have to sell it and split the proceeds. Your pension? She'll probably want half of that too." They sat in somber understanding, letting the gravity of the situation sink in. Each word weighed heavily on my chest as I contemplated what lay ahead, each scenario pulling me further from the secure life I once thought was mine. Upon hearing all of this from Pete, my attorney, I felt even more devastated than if Riley had told me herself. A deep sense of dread engulfed me as I realized how trapped I would be if I chose this path. Nonetheless, I was determined to find out who she was seeing. She refused to disclose any details, but my desire to know the truth only grew. I promised myself that once I uncovered this mystery, I would do everything in my power to ensure she never saw him again, my irritation simmering beneath the surface. Pete sighed deeply and shook his head. "Michael, I understand your position as a friend. However, as a representative of the court, I am obliged to inform you that if you take any action against her partner, I will have to report it. My advice is to let it go. Don't let her betrayal push you into a decision you'll regret," he said firmly. I shot him an angry look, my frustration evident. "So that's it? Just accept it and move on? What if Shelley did this to you? How would you feel if she treated you the way Riley is treating me?" Pete shifted uncomfortably, hesitating before speaking. "Honestly, I'd probably feel the same rage as you. But I know Shelley would never do that. She loves me and knows I'm the best partner for her. We have a strong relationship, and I can't imagine her risking it for a fleeting attraction. Still, if I were in your position, I'd think very carefully about my next steps. Actions driven by anger won't benefit you in the long term. Michael, you may have to come to terms with your reality," Pete advised, his tone unexpectedly light. "If Riley truly has someone watching you as closely as she reports, you're in a tough spot. If you start digging into who she's seeing, she'll find out, and there will be consequences. It seems she's maneuvered herself in such a way that she might even suspect our conversation." "She must have known where we were headed, right?" I said, realizing it. "Damn, I hadn't thought of that," he muttered, a hint of worry in his voice. I noticed a strange expression on Pete's face, and Wes, too, had a satisfied look throughout our entire conversation. I couldn't understand why they were so unbothered by Riley's betrayal. In the end, I brushed off my concerns and raised my glass. "Forget it. Let's just have another drink." The next morning, I woke up earlier than the others, craving solitude. I grabbed my fishing gear and headed upstream to my favorite spot. Just as I was about to cast my line, my phone rang. Usually reception was poor in this area, so I was surprised it worked. Seeing Riley's name on the screen, I decided to ignore the call and let it go to voicemail. When I saw she'd left a message, I played it, and her words unsettled me. "Well, dear, my friends say you got some decent advice from Wes last night. I hope you plan on following it. You're a good man and a wonderful father, but if you act impulsively, I won't hesitate to move on. Now go have some fun." As the message ended, I stared at my phone in shock. There was no way she could know about our conversation unless she was eavesdropping. The thought that she might have planted a listening device had never crossed my mind. Unknown to me, Pete and Wes were watching me from the trees as I listened to the message. They exchanged knowing glances and subtle signs of approval before quietly retreating into the woods toward the cabin. On the way, Pete turned to Wes and asked, "Think this will work, or should we keep up the pressure?" Wes chuckled in response. "Let's keep the pressure on for a few more months. If we keep giving him the right advice and show him that resistance is futile, we'll have him exactly where we want. Just imagine how much more enjoyable our time with Riley will be when we don't have to hide." Pete laughed. "Yeah, and if he spills the beans to his wife or anyone else, we'll just say we're trying to help him. It's the perfect cover." As I fished until noon, my thoughts kept returning to my marriage and the pressing need to find out who Riley was seeing. I wanted to confront her, but I knew I had to wait for solid answers before taking any action. Meanwhile, back at the cabin, Riley was comfortably nestled with her secret lover, spending the day together, her passion evident as she eagerly awaited the other's arrival. "Oh, I've needed this for so long. I can't wait for the other guys to get here. Wes should be joining us by Wednesday, right?" Her companion beamed with delight, saying, "Exactly, darling. You'll have the two of us all to yourself for 2 whole nights before you have to go back to your loyal husband again." He laughed, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "I'll be thrilled when all 3 of us can finally spend some time together," sighed Riley. "I don't like sharing attention. With everything that's happened, Michael can't meet my needs the way he used to. We've taken care of all the arrangements, haven't we? He's an excellent provider and a wonderful father, and I don't want to lose him," she added. The man nodded in agreement. "Yes, I think we've handled everything well, but I really hope he doesn't start seeing someone else and disrupt the balance. We've kept this structure stable for 4 years now. Maybe we should be satisfied with how things were But honestly, the thought of spending entire weekends and evenings with you, free from any limitations, is too tempting to resist. Just be careful not to put too much pressure on him. If he finds out about our situation, it could turn into a big problem. Luckily, we've painted him in a negative light for everyone, Riley replied. If he ever tries to expose the truth, no one would believe him. I checked all his finances as we planned. I can't stop him from writing checks, but I've arranged with the bank to limit his cash withdrawals. Frankly, I regret encouraging him to hire that assistant. She turned out to be too efficient, complicating things. Riley laughed. If I hadn't arranged things to be home, we wouldn't be able to enjoy moments like this, would we? Seeing you a few nights a month or on rare occasions wasn't enough. Now, thanks to our little agreement, I can be with you whenever I want. Meanwhile, I sat by the river, lost in thought. My friends tried to lift my spirits, but nothing seemed to break through the gloom. On Tuesday evening, they got me drunk, and as soon as I fell asleep, Pete and Wes slipped quietly onto the porch to speak in hushed tones. "I'm starting to worry about Michael," Pete admitted, tension in his voice. "We've been with him for 4 days, and if anything, he's become even more determined to leave Riley and take revenge on her new partner. He's so tense he could snap at any moment. How can we keep this situation under control? It all seemed so simple when we planned to keep him distracted and let us spend more time with her. What if he figures everything out and tells our wives?" Wes shrugged. "Relax, Pete. I've got everything under control. Worst case, she decides to divorce him. So what? She just wants to keep Michael around because he's easy to manipulate. I enjoy being with her while she's still married, but it would be almost as enjoyable even without that marriage. We just need to keep him in the dark and make sure our wives don't find out." Half asleep, I overheard their conversation from inside the cabin. I couldn't catch much, but I sensed their frustration over my inability to accept Riley's betrayal and their attempts to persuade me otherwise. My anger flared, directed not only at her but at them as well. I drifted off again, convincing myself I'd handle it alone, without their so-called help. In the days that followed, I became increasingly distant from them. Pete and Wes seemed genuinely concerned, especially when I declared, "I'll find out who she's cheating with and they'll pay for it. I'm certain of that." When it came time to head home, Pete drove in silence beside me. Wes took a separate car, and as soon as he regained cell service, he called Wes. Meanwhile, Wes and Riley were sitting in my living room, listening as Wes updated her on the situation. "He's boiling with rage," Wes reported. "If anything, he's even more determined to get revenge. I think we should ease off and give him some space to cool down. If he figures it all out, we're all in trouble." Riley sat there, visibly shaken, tears streaming down her cheeks. Wes's jaw was clenched, his face flushed with irritation. After the call ended, he turned to Riley, pulling her close. "Don't worry, Riley. I didn't want to resort to extreme measures unless absolutely necessary, but it seems we're running out of options. Let's see how the weekend goes, and if he's still aggressive by Sunday night, we'll file the papers on Monday. With the right court orders, I'll be able to freeze his accounts, both personal and business. We'll make sure he can't take any drastic actions." Late on Friday night, I came home and found Riley waiting for me in the living room. Her eyes were swollen and red, indicating she had been crying, yet there was an unsettling calmness about her, as though she'd spent the evening in comfort. She was wearing one of my shirts and almost nothing else, clearly trying to get my attention. Passing by, I noticed careless marks on her skin, and my anger flared. She met my gaze, almost challenging me to start a conversation. I held her gaze in silence before turning away and walking past without saying a word. She followed me to the bedroom, and when I went into the shower, she tried to join me. I firmly pushed her away. "Leave," I ordered. "I came home hoping we could discuss this, but now that I see you, I realize that's not going to happen. You might try to break me, but I will find a way to make you and everyone else involved pay for this." After the shower, I hastily packed whatever I could fit into my truck. Riley stood in the hallway watching me with her phone in hand. I caught snippets of her conversation, and as I was about to leave, I tried to log into our shared account on the computer, only to find I was locked out. She had changed the password. Anger boiled inside me as I saw her watching me with a look that was almost regretful. "I hoped you'd think this through before it got to this point," she said. "You're making a huge mistake, Michael. I love you more than anyone else I've ever met, and I don't want to lose you. But if you keep this up, you'll end up losing everything, the business and everything we built together. For your information, I hired Wes as my attorney. I just spoke to him, and he's aware of your behavior." I was stunned. Wes had been my lawyer and close friend since the start of his career, and now he was on her side. Without another word, I left the house and drove to the office, planning to use the conference room as a temporary place to stay. When I arrived at the office complex, I stopped at security and spoke with the guard. "I'm dealing with personal issues. My wife and her partner are threatening me. I need you to arrange for extra security and prevent any unauthorized access to the premises." The next morning, around 9, I left the complex to get breakfast. But at the gate, a man stopped me, confirmed my identity, and handed me an envelope. "You've been served," he said before leaving. Inside, I found a restraining order prohibiting me from coming within 100 meters of Riley, the children, or our home. The documents also contained a court order requiring approval for any personal or business expenses, effectively freezing my finances until the divorce proceedings started on Monday. After breakfast, I drove to my assistant's house. When she opened the door, her face turned to one of concern. "Michael, you look terrible. What's going on?" "I needed someone to talk to," I replied, struggling to hold back my emotions. "I didn't know where else to go. Sorry for showing up on the weekend, but I'm not sure who I can trust right now." She stepped back, inviting me in. "Come in, Michael. Want some coffee?" I followed her into the kitchen where her husband sat at the table, clearly surprised by my unexpected visit. Breakfast was half eaten, plates with eggs still on the table. I hesitated, feeling like I was intruding. "I'm sorry. I can leave," I said. Her husband looked at me, studying my face. "Michael, you look awful. Sit down and talk to us. Whatever is happening, you don't have to handle it alone." I opened up to Hank and Penny, sharing everything that had happened since that terrible Thursday almost 2 weeks ago. I don't even know what to do next or how to deal with this situation. My so-called best friends have spent the last 2 weeks trying to convince me to let Riley continue this affair. They keep saying that if it's been going on for years without me noticing, then why ruin it? And Wes, my former best friend, is now Riley's attorney, creating every legal obstacle he can for me. I can't even access my own funds without court approval, which won't come until at least Monday. This morning, all my credit cards were declined when I tried to pay for breakfast. Penny looked utterly stunned. "Michael, I can't believe Riley could do something like this to you," she exclaimed. Turning to Hank, she added, "If you need a place to stay, we have a spare room, Michael. And Hank, maybe we could lend him a little money to help right now." Hank nodded in agreement, while I sat at the table, leaning on it with my head down. Inside, a mixture of despair and fury was raging, but beneath it all, a sense of determination was beginning to awaken. A moment later, Hank said, "If what you're saying is true, Michael, you're going to need serious help. But first, we need to make sure you're not being watched." He looked at me seriously. "Come with me." He led me to the basement and stopped at the bottom of the stairs. "Michael, let's be careful. You need to change clothes. I'll find something for you to wear and leave your things outside. Take a shower here, and we can talk once you're ready." After I changed, we gathered in the small concrete space under the stairs. I began to recount the situation again, feeling foolish but hoping no one could eavesdrop on our conversation. Hank and Penny took detailed notes, and over the next hour, we developed a plan. Hank agreed to reach out to some contacts who could help, and we decided I would rely on Hank and Penny financially for the time being. By Sunday, I was at lunch with Hank and Penny, while Riley, Wes and Pete gathered at my house. After they grew tired, they settled in comfortably. Eventually, Pete broke the silence, sounding anxious. "I'm starting to feel like we've gone too far. What if Michael finds out and decides to confront us? Maybe we should back off a bit." "Relax, Pete," Wes replied with a nonchalant shrug. "We've got him completely under control. He doesn't even have access to his money. We're watching him closely, and right now, he's probably just sulking over coffee with Hank. If he tries to do anything, we'll know before he even gets close." As they continued talking, they remained unaware that a person outside was recording every word and action on camera through the window. On Monday morning, I went out in search of a lawyer. Without Wes, who had always handled my legal matters, I felt completely lost. After several interviews, I decided to hire Ellie Lopez. She left a strong impression and came highly recommended. Her first step was to file motions to unfreeze my business accounts, ensuring I'd have sufficient funds for living expenses. She also hired a private agency to monitor Riley, installed listening devices in my house, and arranged for video surveillance. I instructed Ellie to initiate divorce proceedings on grounds of infidelity. That evening, Hank handed me the recordings he'd made the day before. As I watched, my heart sank, and a wave of anger surged within me. All three of my so-called friends were conspiring with Riley. At least now I had a clear understanding of my enemies. The next morning, I went to the office and made 5 copies of the disc. I sent one to each of my friends' wives, one to Ellie, and kept one for myself, locking the original securely in a safe. Then I uploaded the video to various pay-to-view sites, using everyone's real names. Since Wes had once granted me access to his office, I set up the site from there, ensuring that if it was ever traced, the consequences would fall on Wes. To make sure Riley's friends and family got the full story, I sent similar videos and photos from a computer in the local college library. I knew it would be almost impossible to trace my activity. Those computers required student logins, but I always managed to find one left logged in, allowing me to easily use someone else's account. By Wednesday, my phone was flooded with calls from people who had seen the video. That evening, Riley called me, her voice trembling with emotion. "How could you do this, Michael? I thought you loved me. I told you it was only because you couldn't meet my needs. How could you abandon me like this?" I laughed bitterly. "Riley, I didn't abandon you. You did this to yourself. I'm just following through with the consequences I warned you about. It's now obvious you were probably doing this for years. Those times you thought I wasn't home and came in late. Now everything makes sense. When I'm done, you'll regret crossing me." Later that day, my phone rang. It was my sister, Eva. "Well, big brother," she said with a hint of irony in her voice, "I see you've finally faced the truth about your dream wife. Did you send that video? I didn't even know she was seeing all 3 of them. Looks like you're discovering something new every day." There was bitterness in her laugh before she hung up. Soon after, Wes called. As soon as I answered, he unleashed a torrent of insults and threats. "You're an idiot, Michael. When I'm done with you, you'll regret ever crossing me. I'll be with your precious wife whenever I want, and I'll take a good chunk of your money. If you'd only listened, you could have kept your family, your finances, and a life that mattered. But now, you'll be scraping the bottom when I'm through." Riley's parents also reached out. Her mother, through tears, pleaded, "Michael, how could you do this to her? I know she hurt you, but sharing those images went too far. Couldn't you have handled this in a more mature way?" By the end of the day, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. Although I knew the upcoming fight would be tough, at least I had been able to strike back. Thanks to the advanced answering system I'd set up at my company, I had recorded every word, ready to use at any moment. When I first chose this complex phone system, I never imagined it would play such an important role in Wes's downfall. Back then, he was still my lawyer and friend, the one who recommended the system for security reasons. Installation was fairly straightforward. Every incoming call was met with a recorded message. "Thank you for calling. All calls are recorded for future reference. If you don't want your call recorded, please hang up. If the caller stayed on the line, their conversation was recorded. Anyone who ignored this warning essentially consented to the recording, no questions asked. It seemed Wes either didn't pay attention to the message or was so furious that he missed it, resulting in all his threats and bragging being captured on tape. The irony wasn't lost on me. He had insisted the telecom provider program exactly this message, and now his own words were used against him. The sense of justice was almost sweet. Nevertheless, once the divorce proceedings began, Riley's supporters quickly pulled back. Luckily, Hank's friend had already compiled all compromising video and audio evidence on that very first Saturday. Otherwise, the private detectives I hired couldn't have found much of value. They recorded a few vague calls, but most were useless for my case. Ellie wasted no time and acted swiftly. One of her first steps was filing a complaint against Wes with the State Bar Association. His threats and unethical behavior led to an immediate suspension, ultimately resulting in his permanent disbarment. While it didn't erase everything, knowing he would never practice law again felt like a significant victory. After that, my divorce proceeded quickly, and Riley received much less than she'd hoped for, only 10% of our assets, while I retained control of the business. The judge awarded me custody of our children, largely thanks to a critical photo taken by Hank's friend. Almost by accident, he captured Riley with other men in our living room, inadvertently capturing my 6-year-old daughter peeking through the patio door, witnessing everything. When the judge looked at the photo, he ruled in my favor, granting me custody. My claims against Wes were also successful, resulting in about $2 million in compensation. These claims included breaches of attorney-client privilege and blatant conflicts of interest due to his representation of Riley. After his legal defeats and his wife Shelley taking most of his assets in their divorce, Wes was nearly broke. Mark and Shelley also divorced, and she ended up with the lion's share of his wealth. As for Pete and Jessica, they stayed together. It turned out she had been an accomplice in their affairs from the beginning, willingly joining in their escapades. However, Pete's patience eventually ran out, especially when Wes and Mark began frequently staying over, taking all of Jessica's attention. One night, tensions flared and Pete confronted them. Wes and Mark responded with such force that they sent Pete to the hospital. Criminal charges were filed, resulting in both serving a year in prison. The events ultimately led to the breakup of Pete and Jessica's marriage. Almost 2 years later, as I was sitting in my office reviewing recent developments in the conflict involving Wes, Mark, and Pete over Jessica, Penny looked up from her book and asked if I'd had any conversations with Riley. She mentioned that Riley was permitted supervised visits with the children by court order. I shook my head in response. No, our discussions are strictly limited to what's absolutely necessary and only about the children. I'd prefer to avoid even that if possible. For a long time, I thought she was my soulmate, but then everything changed. I still struggle to understand her behavior. It baffles me how a woman who claimed to love her husband could betray him so profoundly. Penny listened intently as I rummaged through my desk drawer, pulling out an old file and sliding it across to her. I'm not sure why I kept this letter, I admitted. I can't even explain why I felt the need to read it. Do you remember about 1.5 years ago when Riley's mom came here with tears in her eyes? I continued. She insisted that I read this letter. Penny opened the folder and began reading Riley's heartfelt words. My dear Michael, I know you may think I no longer have the right to address you this way, but you'll always be the only man I truly loved. I realize I've lost you forever, but I need to pour out my soul. I never intended to threaten you. I never planned to be unfaithful, yet I betrayed you. You probably remember how close I was to Wes and Pete in high school, and at the time, it didn't seem like an issue to you. The first time I was unfaithful, it was almost accidental. It happened on our 6th anniversary when you were supposed to work late on a major theft case, and I went alone to a party at Wes and Shelley's. I drank too much and found myself in a compromising situation. Shelley asked Wes to take me home, with Mark following to pick him up afterward. On the way, Wes reminisced about our school days, and by the time we reached my house, I'd lost all sense of reason. At first I asked them to stop, but they kept sharing memories, and eventually I gave in. That night we spent nearly an hour together. I won't lie, Michael, I enjoyed it. Perhaps it was the thrill of being with both of them that completely captivated me. After that first experience, it became a regular thing, happening at least a couple of times a month whenever we could find a moment to slip away. I know you noticed my occasional absences during those weekend trips. Then Wes suggested an open relationship, claiming it would prevent any fallout. I was sure you'd never risk losing the kids or our life together, so I agreed to his proposal. I'm so sorry, Michael, for everything. I was weak and selfish. I beg you to forgive me for my selfishness. Always yours, Riley. When Penny finished reading, she looked at me, her eyes shining with unrestrained tears, her jaw clenched in anger. Michael, I truly believe Riley loved you in her own way, and I suspect Wes manipulated her from the start. We've both heard rumors about him over the years, and I wouldn't be surprised if he deliberately got her drunk. I nodded, acknowledging her insight. I understand, Penny, but even if there's some truth to her story, I can't be sure it's the whole truth. Riley always seemed more drawn to Wes than I'd have liked. We argued after parties because I felt she was too friendly, but I never voiced anything that could have escalated into a serious conflict. After I learned the truth, thanks to you and Hank, I even did a DNA test on the children. You can't imagine the relief I felt when I confirmed they were mine. I sighed, looking down. Maybe she thinks she loves me, but I doubt it was ever truly mutual. For her, it seemed more about comfort and convenience. I was a reliable provider and a caring father, making it easy for her to stay with me. I worry that I was just her last hope. I loved her deeply, but I doubt she ever truly reciprocated. She seemed more focused on her own pleasure and needs. I stared out the window, letting my thoughts settle. It's strange, Penny. I always thought I'd end up alone after all this. But when I met Susan, who loved not only me but also my children, life moved on. I'm happy again. Riley is shattered. Her life has turned into a real nightmare. I heard she drinks constantly and looks like a street wanderer, getting what she deserved. My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you.